What's up, guys? Welcome back to Deck Tech for Decks. I'm your host, Caleb. If you want to support me, you can now follow me on Patreon. Not only is it the best way to support the channel, additionally, you'll get more say in what decks I do. Special shout out to all of my high contributing patrons. Newsome, you rock. Additionally, you can support the channel by using the TCGplayer link in the description down below. Now, let's get into today's Deck Tech with Kroxa and Kronos. And honestly, guys, I'm excited about these two because Mardu is kind of in a weird spot, I'll admit, right? There's not a lot of ways to interact with our opponents winning, but there is a lot of ways to protect our win. So our goal is just going to be to win as fast as possible, which we can definitely do with Kroxa and Kronos since they do have a one card infinite combo. If you don't know how that works, I'll explain it briefly. You have Altar of Dementia on the battlefield, then you cast your commander. Then they enter the battlefield. In response to the ETB, you sacrifice them and then you mill 6 cards, you exile the 5 cards, bringing Kroxa and Kronos back. Then you can do that over and over again and mill a ton of cards in your library. You'll net 1 every time. Just make sure you don't exile the wrong cards and you should win from there. It ends up being like a Savine's Reclamation line where you grab a Dockside and Underworld Breach and then win either through using the Dahada line, or you can use Bolas's Citadel. It's your choice and kind of revolves around what you have to exile, right, to keep that line going. Additionally, we did just throw in Terror of the Peaks. That way we can just start doming people. cEDH life totals kind of get low because people are kind of, you know, willy-nilly with them. So in a scenario where we have enough cards in our library, we can end the game with a Terror of the Peaks line. Another thing that I think makes these commanders pretty viable is as long as we can get 5 or 6 cards in our graveyard, and then one of them is Hoarding Broodlord, we can do the Hoarding Broodlord thing where we get Sacrifice or Burnt Offering and then peer into the abyss to draw half our library and win that way. There's just a lot of avenues you can take with this deck, which leaves open quite a bit of slots to put in a grindy strategy. Yes, we are going to try to outgrind our opponents if we can't win early game, and we're going to do that using a Power Matter strategy, using stuff like Greven and a bunch of other things that just have massive power. Another thing we can do is we can use Ruthless Technomancer over here to be mana positive with a lot of those creatures that are kind of useless in the deck. So they're not really useless in the deck if we can turn them into rituals. Additionally, Ruthless Technomancer does have an infinite combo in the deck, so we can utilize that as well. If that sounds like a deck tech you want to get into, let's get into it. Let's kick it off by talking about how the deck wins, because let's be honest, that's all we care about. Kroxa and Kronos do have a 1-card infinite combo with Altar of Dementia. All you have to do is cast Kroxa of Kronos, and in response to the ETB, sacrifice them, you'll mill 6 cards, and then you can exile 5 cards to bring Kroxa and Kronos back with their own ability. Kinda busted. We do only net 1 card, but that's all we need. Just be sure to not exile your key pieces, and there are several lines we can go for just in case we are forced to exile some of our pieces along the way. One of the most efficient ways to win the game, requiring no open mana, is to keep exiling cards till you hit a Dockside or a Ruthless Technomancer. Those 2 pieces are going to give us the mana we need for our Savine's Reclamation. From there, we have a couple different lines we can take. The one that nets you the most mana is you actually, with the last trigger of your commander, you reanimate the Ruthless Technomancer, killing your commander. And then from there, you can Savine's Reclamation, the Dockside, and your Underworld Breach, and go into a Bolas's Citadel, Sensei's Divining Top, and Aetherflux Reservoir line. This can generate infinite storm count, and then you can dome everybody to death. Or you could take the Dahada Flicker line. All you need is Dahada, Flicker, and Underworld Breach, and you'll net treasure tokens. Now, this is just a way that we can keep looking for a win con that doesn't cause us to start exiling a ton of stuff from our graveyard, right? Because Kroxa is making us exile 5 things from our graveyard. With the Dahada line, we just have to exile the 3 cards with our Underworld Breach for the Flicker. And additionally, we're actually netting mana, and then we can go for that same Bolas's Sensei Divining Top, Aetherflux Reservoir line, or just the classic dual caster twin flame combo. So those are 2 very efficient win lines we can use having no available mana, which is very important in this deck, or any deck, right? Another really flexible thing about using Ruthless Technomancer to sacrifice our commander, netting 6 treasure tokens, and then having the ability to reanimate Dockside is that that can go infinite if our treasure count is at 4. This deck does try to win pretty early, so that might be a tough ask, but if you go that route, you're never casting anything. All you have to cast is your commander, and then from there you go infinite and you're reanimating the Ruthless Technomancer, and then you're using the Ruthless Technomancer to reanimate Dockside. So there's almost no room for interaction, which is kind of awesome. And then you just mill everybody out with Altar of Dementia. But again, if we can't net enough treasures off Dockside, we can still just get enough mana to go the Sevinne's Reclamation route. Another really amazing thing about this commander is he really abuses Hoarding Broodlord lines, because this guy can not only reanimate him himself, as long as we have 5 cards in the graveyard, we can entomb Hoarding Broodlord and then cast our commander, reanimate it. Now obviously that's not a very efficient line, but it is some resilience to the deck, so it's worth mentioning. But 9 times out of 10 we are just trying to entomb, reanimate Hoarding Broodlord. The thing about this line is you do need an opening of 2 mana if you only have Hoarding Broodlord on the battlefield. How it works is you're going to grab your Saw in Half, and then you can tap your Hoarding Broodlord for 1 mana and then spend 2 colorless mana to Saw in Half your Hoarding Broodlord. From there you're going to grab Sacrifice or Burnt Offering. Then you can easily tap one of your Broodlord copies to cast the Burnt Offering. I like Burnt Offering here because you can add any combination of black and red, so you can float a red for your Dockside and a black for your rituals, right? And then you're going to go ahead and cast Peer into the Abyss for 6 mana, because again the other Broodlord will go ahead and help cast it as well. So you're going to float 2 mana, 1 black, 1 red. That'll give you enough to cast your Docksides. It'll give you enough to cast your rituals. That way you draw half your deck and you've got a little bit of floating mana to win the game from there. 9 times out of 10 we are just going to entomb and then reanimate this guy. But hey, if we've lost our Underworld Breach, Hoarding Broodlord is going to be our next avenue to draw half our library, win the game, and go for a Bolas's Citadel line, winning that way. Or again, we do have the Dualcaster Mage and Twin Flame combo, which this card can easily draw us into. Another card I want to talk about very briefly, because it's very good in Hoarding and Adnaz lines, is Brass's Tunnel Grinder. Now we can take all of those lands that we drew into, discard all of them, and draw into our win cons. Not drawing into the win cons or stuff to win the game off of a Hoarding or Adnaz line doesn't happen often, but when it does, you're going to be happy you have this card. Another thing this card is going to do early game is fill our graveyard, right? If we have Hoarding Broodlord in our hand, we can now easily discard it to the graveyard while also getting 5 other cards in our graveyard, draw into more cards, and then the odds that we draw into something to reanimate it or enough mana to cast our commander is huge. So this card's going to absolutely blow this deck open, in my opinion. Our final parting line does cost 8 mana, but hey, if you've got a 1 card win the game, throw it in the deck. The odds that we can get to 8 mana can happen, and then when the stars align and you go for it. We're going to throw the Hoarding Broodlord in our graveyard, grab Reanimate, cast Reanimate, and then we need 2 floating mana for the Saw in Half effect, and from there we're good to go. Notably, if you already have 2 creatures on the battlefield, this does lower the cost of this combo by 2, so it is flexible in that aspect, and it turns it into a 6 mana combo instead of an 8 mana combo because of the Hoarding giving your Saw in Half Convoke. Another way we can win with Sevinne's Reclamation. Now this one is probably one of our least efficient ways to win, but it is in the deck for redundancy. Sevinne's Reclamation, and then you're going to do Dance of the Dead and Animate Dead. Now what's going to happen here is you're just going to reanimate something like a Ruthless Technomancer or a Dockside to get enough treasure for Sevinne's Reclamation. From then you flash it back and you're going to grab Dance of the Dead and Animate Dead. And then you can easily go ahead and go infinite with the Kroxa Kunoros and Terror of the Peaks line, as long as you have Altar of Dementia on the battlefield. And then you're just going to start dealing 6 damage to your opponents. Now, like I said, a lot of things have to align for you to want to go for this, but in a scenario where it's your best shot, you can go for it, especially when life totals in cEDH get really low. This is one of the grindier ways to win the game, but hey, throw it in the deck if you got it, right? And last but not least, we have our Hail Mary with Praetor's Grasp. Not only can this grab us another Underworld Breach in a pinch, but it can grab us a Thassa's Oracle. We can easily mill out our entire library with our commander and then Thoracle for the win. I don't really want to do that, but hey, if again you got it, go for it. Now, this is where I get lost in the sauce and lose my cEDH audience, but we are going to run a small power matter strategy. Now, some people audibly laughed when they saw these cards, but I think they're going to do a couple things in the deck, and I just want to explain myself, right? I think this deck does want the ability to get 5 cards in the graveyard before we cast our commander, just to have some ability to choose what we're discarding, right? It's going to suck if the first Kronos trigger, you're going to get your Ether Flux, your Bullis's Citadel, and your Sensei's Top. It could happen. And then you're just like, well, we can't go for that line. So I kind of want some cards in the graveyard before we go for our line, right? And then late game, I kind of want the ability to try to outgrind our opponents. I don't want this to be a dead in the water deck. Either we win by turn 3 or we just don't win at all. I don't want that. I want some way, some form to outgrind our opponents, and a power matter strategy is going to be how we get there. So just keep that in mind when I go over these next cards, that this is a last ditch effort or a very early game play to kind of fill the graveyard. So have that in the back of your head. These are last ditch. I don't by any means want to do this over any of the other win cons that we just talked about. With that disclaimer out of the way, let's get into it. Wall of Blood is going to be pretty good here. I just want to pay like 30 life, sack it to Altar of Dementia, and throw 30 cards in the graveyard. That's going to be a solid way to look for a win con, or just outright get us to the win con if we have enough for that Savine's Reclamation, or we have a Reanimate in our hand. Another thing we can do with this is generate a ton of mana with our Ruthless Technomancer effects, right? Another card Wall of Blood is going to be absolutely broken with is Altar of the Wretched. Now we can pay a ton of life, let's say 30, cast Altar of the Wretched, and then we're not only going to draw 30 cards, but we're going to mill 30 cards. That's going to get us to our win con. It's kind of like a Hoarding Broodlord, right? Hoarding Broodlord draws you a ton of cards. Now Altar of the Wretched with Wall of Blood can draw you a ton of cards as well. Now I know we're going to a 2-card combo instead of just Hoarding Broodlord line and win the game, but I still think it's good enough to see cEDH play, especially when we are running Sarah's Ascendant and Lupin Prototype in the deck. Now Lupin Prototype, we just draw 5 cards, mill 5 cards, and same with Sarah's Ascendants, right? Draw 6 cards, mill 6 cards. That's going to get us really deep into our library. We're also running Greven, Praetor's Captain. Now, I know this looks kind of funny, but this is a last-ditch effort to get us back in the game. Like, understand where we're at when we want to play this card. We've got nothing left, our hand's almost empty, and no win con in sight. Then you play this guy, and you start sacrificing your commander, or even a Wall of Blood. If you got it on the battlefield, you're literally grasping for straws at this point, but hey, you could get there. And then, Greven's gonna just be massive, so we could sack him to our Altar of the Wretched effects, or even that Ruthless Technomancer. After we draw a ton of cards with Greven, we sack Greven, and we get all the treasure tokens. Seems like a pretty decent way for this deck to get back in the game. That way we just don't lose to the first person that cast a Rhystic Study. Moving on, we're going to blaze through the rituals because rituals are rituals and everyone knows them. We have our Simian Spirit Guide, Jeweled Lotus for our commander, Mox Diamond, Crow Mox, Mana Crypt, Lotus Petal, Soul Ring, Dark Ritual, Rite of Flame, Cabal Ritual, Jeska's Will, Mana Vault. Treasonous Ogre seems pretty good here, just because, again, once we get enough mana for our Hoarding Broodlord, or we just get enough mana to cast our commander, we do just win the game. Crick, Son of Yawgmoth, there is a lot of cards we want to cast with 3 black mana pips in the deck, and Crick can get us there, right? For only 4 mana. We have our Bullis's Citadel, we have our Hoarding Broodlord, which now Hoarding Broodlord's only 4 mana, stupid broken, and then as always we do have Necropotence. The other thing we have to do in cEDH is prevent our opponents from winning. Now we don't have to do that as much in this deck because this is a turn 3 deck, so we're kind of one of the first to try to put up a win, but again we want to protect that win or prevent our opponents from winning as much as possible, so we are going to run Drannith Magistrate, Ranger Captain of Eos. Not only can this grab Esper Sentinel, but that sacrifice ability is busted. Orcish Bowmasters to get rid of all of their value pieces, Silence to stop them from winning or to prevent them from interacting with our win. Dothy Voidwalker, another solid way to get some counter spells in a Mardu deck. Reprieve, 9 times out of 10, when someone goes for an Adnos, they don't have more mana for an Adnos, so Reprieve can be pretty solid here because it's going to let everybody know, hey, that player has Adnos, and it's going to prevent their Adnos for that turn, so blue players can step up. Grand Abolisher, again, another way to protect our win. Deflecting Swat, Everybody Lives. Everybody Lives does prevent Thassa's Oracle because it does say players can't win the game, so it's better than players can't lose the game effects. It's definitely going to be solid in those decks that can't run blue and don't have a lot of ways to interact with Thassa's Oracle. Tybalt's Trickery, another solid way to counter spells in red, who would have thought. Abrade is just a solid way to get rid of stacks pieces. We need our activated abilities of our artifacts, and we need to be able to cast stuff from our graveyard or interact with our graveyard, so again, Abrade's going to be solid here. Another thing we're going to zoom through is the Tutors, because again, Tutors be tutoring. Demonic Sonic Tutor, Imperial Seal, Vampiric Tutor, Wishclaw Talisman, Gamble, Goblin Engineer. Now, this is in the deck for Altar of Dementia, so I figured I'd point that out. Enlightened Tutor, again, we want that Altar, or even an early Mana Crypt. It seems pretty busted. Unmarked Grave, Entomb for the Hoardling. Then we have Reanimate, Beseech the Mirror Breaker. This can grab us the One Ring, or it's just going to grab us Dahadi. Both pretty solid. Moving into our value pieces, we have Esper Sentinel, Necropotence, Wheel of Misfortune, and Wheel of Fortune. I like these cards here because, again, they're going to fill our graveyard a little bit. That way we have something in our graveyard when we cast our commander. Brass's Tunnel Grinder. Again, I think this card's going to be insane, especially with the One Ring. There's a lot of times you use the One Ring, draw 4 useless cards. You can Brass's Tunnel Grinder. I think this is going to be a really useful card in cEDH in general, just to get rid of all the chaff and get your useful pieces. What's so broken about this is it doesn't cause you to discard your hand. So you get to keep everything you want and get rid of everything you don't. It seems good, and it's only one-sided. Everybody hates Wheel of Misfortune because you could just win someone the game. Brass's Tunnel Grinder doesn't do that. Final Fortune, just in case we need that extra turn to get the final punch in, and that's going to do it for our value pieces and tutors. What's up, guys? I'm back to see you out. Let me know what you think about this deck down below. Honestly, I think it has the potential to compete with some of the top Mardu commanders, just because having a 1-card infinite combo in the command zone is kind of busted in a color pairing that generates this much mana. I'm really excited to see what you guys think about this build down below. Let me know what you think about the Power Matter strategy. Honestly, I think I'm cooking a little bit, but a lot of people have been like, man, that's fucking wild. So I'm really excited to see what your guys' take on that is. And as always, yeah, let me know if you would make any changes. Let me know how to make this deck better. As always, if we all come together, we can all make a better deck, right? With that being said, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, hit that bell notification, right? If you hit the bell notification, you get notified when you see my weird builds. As always, I would like to thank my high contributing patrons, Newsome, Chicken Salad. You guys are amazing. Couldn't do it without you guys, as well as all of my other patrons. If you guys want more say in what decks I cover, becoming a patron is a solid way to do that. We vote weekly, and then whoever gets the most votes, I build the deck, and it's a good time. As always, I hope this helped you in your deck building endeavors, and I will see you guys in the next one.